none of you were here, so I appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to show you a little bit of art, but before I do that, I want to talk about some of what I think about as I make art and some of the questions that I think about in the world that we kind of reside in. And so, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. When people hear that I make art a lot, they're like, oh, you're a painter. And it's like, well, I do painting, but mostly not. I do performance, I do video, I do installation work, which is a big fancy word for sculptures that aren't quite like, carved out of marble or something like that. I do screen printing and I do photography. So the question is, if I work in all these different media, what makes a Dred Scott work a Dred Scott work? Well, I tell people I make revolutionary art to propel history forward. My work is deeply engaged with helping an audience confront a lot of the cohering norms of society, particularly American society, but also imagining how the world can be radically different and far better. And as part of that, I tell people, I like to illuminate this era. So the question though is, what is this era? So I have some questions for you. First one's a real simple one. We're not going for consensus or agreement. I just want sort of yes or no answers to this. So the first question is, do you guys have hope for the future? Yes. Muted hope for the future. Okay, everybody can get in on the next one. It'll be easier question. Do you think that the US government tortures people?
Yes.
All right, we got torture. We got a lot of torture going on. This is good, okay. Do you think that basic rights in this country are being eroded?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Do you think that having 1 in 9 young black men in prison is acceptable?
No.
Okay, do you think a society where 1 in 4 women are battered in her lifetime is a model society to uphold?
No.
Okay. Does it make you feel comfortable that the United States government is spying on everybody's email, phone call, and every website you go to, and everybody on the planet?
No.
No. Okay. Do you think American lives are more important than other people's lives?
No.
Do you think that leaders in this or any other country are doing what's needed to stop global climate change?
No.
Do you think that the government lies to you?
Yes.
All right, we got a lying government. Okay. Does a society where police chase and murder unarmed youth on video and then work to cover it up have any legitimacy?
No.
Does a society that knowingly poisons the drinking water of its citizens have any legitimacy?
No.
Okay. So for those of you who said they had hope for the future, the present's not looking so good. And so what's that hope based on? And, and I will tell you something, I have hope for the future too, but the hope I have, and that I hope that you will kind of connect with, is that people can confront the real horrors that I just alluded to and touched on briefly about the present. And they can change the world. So this is a world, it's a very polarized world where a tiny handful of people controls the great wealth and the knowledge that humanity as a whole has created. But it doesn't have to be that way. We don't actually have to live like this. People can actually make a radically different and far better world, a world without classes, and where as part of making this world, they can transform themselves. But to do that, we need revolution. And so my work is about, yes, I will always acknowledge when somebody applauds for revolution. That's what we need. And a lot of the work is going to be talking about that, and the talk is going to be talking about that a bit. And as part of my work is actually about helping to bring that new world into being. And so I'm going to start showing you some work, but to do that I want to turn out the lights on the front so you can see it better. So got to go over here, press a button, hopefully it'll darken, and if any people are like serious tweeters in the audience, my handle is @DredScottArt, and you can hashtag it revolutionary art, but I would say just pay attention to the talk, don't worry about tweeting so much, but my advice on that often is it goes unheeded, so if you got to tweet, that's it. So this is a work that, I'm going to show some work that you can see in the gallery. This is a work called American Newspeak, Please Feel Free. It's old work. I made it in 1987, 1988. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more depth. This is just an excerpt of some of it. This is just the first 4 pieces from it. And before going and showing you details of it, I want to actually go and show kind of a little the process behind it and talk about, particularly since we're at an educational institution, some of you got, well, how do you make this kind of work? So this is the work I was making before I made this. There were photos in the punk clubs in Chicago. I was making this from 1983 to 1986. I was working, on the dance floor, and these are people just dancing, having a good time. But they're really showing a lot of the energy and vibrance of people who were growing up in Ronald Reagan's America, which was a real nightmare. And the people who didn't fit in, well, this is what we were doing. So I was trying to figure out how do I make work about this era, and so this is the first thing I came to. But then I made work more like the first slide I showed you, which had these photo montages on the wall, and then there were shelves below them. And so as I was doing that, I was thinking about making photo montages. So this is sort of my sketchbook. I don't really draw very much, and this is kind of how I work. So I would just cutting and pasting, things together and saying what made an interesting clash of images or something, and then I would write sort of a text above it that might, and you'll see it. This one says "War on Gangs." You can see it right there, kind of in bad handwriting, and that'll just remember that because it'll come back in a little bit. And this one, is another thing. I just, cut and pasted a couple things together, made some prints. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I like that. And then I wrote War on Crime, and then I said, no, I'm going to do Simpson-Rodino Amnesty Act, which is one of the works that's actually available. You can see, and history has actually sort of gotten beyond this work. Nobody knows what the Simpson-Rodino Amnesty Act is anymore. It's one of the works that actually hasn't aged so well, but I'm just showing it because it had this sort of sketch for it. And so it was an attempt to actually, largely to get a lot of immigrants to turn themselves and their families in theory, to allow them to stay in the country. And this act was passed in 1986. But anyway, the main point is that this is how this photo montage got created, how I was thinking, what my process of it is. But the reason I was making this work, and again, you see there's a photo montage on the wall, and then there's some text down here, and I'll read you some of the text that's there later. There's another bit of text here, and then there's a reproduction. You see this photo montage is reproduced here, and this is a book. And so what I wanted to do, when I was making work that was talking about this era, I really wanted people to be able to not just come into a gallery and say, oh, I like, or oh, I don't like. A lot of the sort of socially engaged or political work I was looking at, if you kind of agreed with the politics of the artist, then you would say, oh, this is great, you might spend more time with it. And if you didn't agree, you just walk by it. And I really wanted to make work that the audience was kind of both part of the work but implicated in it the second they saw it. So this was actually posing, an opportunity for people to engage. Because what happened was, this text was some sort of political statement that kind of referred a little bit to the photo montage, but not directly. And it said that, right here, it said, if you agree with this text, then you can take one of these prints. And so I was trying to extend the work beyond the gallery scene into people's homes. And so it said, look, but if you take a print, then you have to write why in the book below. So these were installations for audience participation. And here you see that somebody's participating. They're actually writing in the book. And I really wanted to make it, again, not just what I thought, but what the audience is engaging with these political and social questions. So the first one in the series is War is Peace. And if you guys have read 1984 by George Orwell, which I had read, probably around the same time we made this work, I was really thinking of the ideas of what was encompassed in an oppressive state that actually manipulates language to have a sort of totalitarian government that controls people through the use of language and making contradictory things go together. So with War is Peace, there was text that went along with that said, if you believe that the United States of America should be overthrown through armed revolution and are currently participating in activity to do so, please feel free to take a print. Now, there was obviously no armed guard standing next to it to really assure that the person believed that. But the image is kind of cool. I think a lot of people would be like, oh, that's a cool image. And one thing you'll see, there's an American flag that's sort of there. You'll see it better if you go see the artwork live. But it's like, oh, this is kind of cool, I like this. But then you actually have to sort of say, oh yeah, that's a statement I agree with. And there's even more of a trick. So the print, you see, it is a reproduction of that, but it has the text on it right there. And what it says is it takes the statement and puts it in a positive. It says the person who owns this print believes that the United States of America should be overthrown through armed revolution, and they're currently participating in activity to do so. It is because of this that they were given the print. And so it's going to extend the dialogue of what I was doing in the gallery into people's homes and make them responsible for that question. It doesn't mean that they suddenly actually do agree with that, although I think some people that came to it actually did agree with that statement. But it means that you have to discuss these issues. Another one was freedom of slavery, and because I've got a lot of work to show, because you can see this whole body of work at the gallery, and I encourage you to come to it, I'm not going to go into great detail on each of these pieces. But again, it has the same style, that there's a photo montage, it has text on the top, and the text is, freedom of slavery, the next thing of George Orwell's 1984. And if the following relates to you, please feel free to take a print. And when I speak as a victim of American democracy. You and I have never seen democracy, all we've seen is hypocrisy. And when we open up our eyes and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of somebody who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who's been the victim of Americanism. We don't see the American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. Malcolm X. Ignorance is strength, the third thing from Orwell. And again, this flag is actually starting to become a recurring theme in this work. And this work was 1987, and it's like American flag clashing with police actually wrestling somebody to the ground. They're violently on top of him. It looks a little bit like Eric Garner, which we'll come back to. So after ignorance to strength, we have be all that you can be, which many of you probably know, but some of you are young enough that you might not. That was the slogan of the U.S. Army back in the 80s and 90s. And so, much like war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, be all that you can be. People could be a lot more than either killers for the U.S. imperialism or cannon fodder for them. And this, the montage here, it's hard to see in this dark, but if you, again, go see the actual artwork, this is sort of a tank tread, and it's kind of chewing up these soldiers. And so, you can be a lot more than being a soldier. And this is, and again, in the 80s, the U.S. was ramping up its sort of aesthetic and propaganda around war, which most of you guys who are in university here, your entire lifetime, the U.S. has been at war with somebody. It wasn't the case during my entire lifetime. There were periods where it wasn't fighting somebody, at least as openly, but your lifetime, it's pretty open. But this was actually getting ramped up in the 80s. We serve and protect. And I'll just talk briefly about this image. You can see the two Ks. There's obviously another K over there. This is, basically it is a truck. I mean, you see a swastika here. This is a truck of white supremacists, various white supremacists, a whole truckload of them, quite literally. And this is actually scenes from a rebellion that happened in Detroit in 1967. And the rebellion was sparked off by the police killing somebody, or brutalizing somebody in Detroit. War on drugs. What would you think if you knew that thousands of black people were rounded up in mass arrest? What would you do if tens of thousands more were being stopped, searched, degraded at gunpoint, and often beaten? Would you speak out? What would you think if the United States military were given police powers for the first time since Reconstruction and charged with sealing the southern border? What if tanks rolled down the streets of Los Angeles using a battering ram to destroy occupied homes in the black community? What if the police followed these tanks, throwing explosive devices into homes? Would you speak out? What if the city government were forcing the eviction of black tenants on the basis that they were quote-unquote undesirables and seizing the property of landlords who refused to comply? What if they called this a war on drugs? And again, I'm old, I'm long in the tooth, I've been around for a while. Some of you younger people might have seen the NWA movie, Straight Outta Compton. And the opening scenes of that movie, there's this tank basically that has a battering ram that knocks through somebody's house. That's what was going on then. I mean, this is not exaggeration, but a lot of times people didn't really think about this. They didn't think about what are the implications of having militarized equipment ramming down black people's houses, throwing explosives into people's houses. And then it was all done. Well, we've got this drug problem, so we're actually doing this to protect people, is how it was framed. Nowadays, people, in fact, there's a thing in the New York Times, which I haven't yet read, but Jay-Z says, war on drugs, biggest fail ever, where Jay-Z collaborated with Molly Crabapple. And it looks like a pretty good article, but I haven't read it. So anyway, the last piece I'm going to show from this body of work is actually not on view right now, but it's a project called What's the Proper Way to Display a U.S. Flag? And so the other 11 pieces, many of them had flags in it. This one, again, has a photo montage on the wall. There's books on shelves. And this one had a flag that was a 3x5 foot flag that people could stand on it as they wrote responses to the question. And the photo montage is simple. It just has text. What's the proper way to display a U.S. flag? There were South Korean students holding signs saying, "Yankee, go home, son of a bitch," and burning U.S. flags. And then there were flag-draped coffins coming back from Vietnam in a troop transport. And so I said in a lot of this work, these are installations for audience participation. And the audience participated a lot in this. You could see that in this particular one, there were, whole paragraph-long responses or page-long responses. Sometimes they were just a sentence. People, actually, drew. They made drawings. They also said, "Hey, the proper way to display the U.S. flags on a pole." Very simple answer. They also had other drawings that spanned 2 pages. They sometimes, because this particular show was in an art school, they left a film strip for me to read later, which I thought was, inventive. They were writing in different languages. This, I believe, is Farsi, but they were writing in about 8 or 9 different languages from, I think, 12 different countries I've identified. And there were 1,000 pages by the time this particular exhibition finished. it got a little bit controversial. This is a demonstration in front of the Art Institute of Chicago, which is physically attached to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. There are also financial and other relationships, but I was a student at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And this was a demonstration of 2,500 reactionary veterans, mostly from World War II and the Korean War. The Vietnam vets mostly weren't there. And they were almost all white. And they chanted things like, "The flag and the artist, hang them both high," bringing back images of lynching. And so they also held signs. One sign was the proper way to show respect to an art student. So if you guys are art students and somebody does this to you, they're just showing you the proper respect that you deserve. Okay? Just so you know, I mean, they cleared it up for you. The other thing is go try it there chunk, where supposedly if a caricature of me were standing on a flag, that if I went there, or some other country, wherever there was, that I'd be confronted by armed soldiers that would sort of threaten me, which, is kind of, these guys either had a profound sense of irony or no clue about irony, and I'm really not sure which. Because of this controversy, and this is, you have demonstration 2,500 veterans when you're an art student in school, it's like, this is kind of significant. So as part of this, it's like, I'm doing press conferences. This is one of my first press conferences. I wanted to get my views and my ideas about what this work represented out in public. I didn't just want the news to be able to say what they thought. I'm collapsing a lot of history, but this did get to the point where Herbert Walker Bush publicly called the work disgraceful. And so I'm like, wait a minute. President of the United States knows I exist, and he doesn't like what I'm doing. Oh man, I want to do this job for the rest of my life. This is great. Got to the point where the Senate voted to ban display of the flag on the floor or ground. The Senate on Thursday voted 97-0 to outlaw displaying the flag of the United States on the floor or ground and denounced the flag exhibit at the floor of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I don't know much about art, but I know desecration when I see it, said Minority Leader Robert J. Dole, Republican of Kansas, in introducing the measure. This disgraceful display needs much more than symbolic action. So, again, I'm 24 years old. I'm an undergraduate art student in a Midwestern art school. The Senate has gone to the extraordinary length of passing legislation which effectively outlaws my artwork. And so, I didn't know everything at the time, but I did know that this was really significant. That this was unlikely to happen to me, or frankly, any other artist, really, at any point. But that it also showed how vulnerable this country and its ruling class was. They were threatened by an undergraduate art student in a Midwestern school in a student art exhibition and went to the extraordinary length of banning that artwork. Why? Because art and ideas matter. This really demonstrated in spades the power of art. And it also, when people were waiting in line for an hour, sometimes people from the housing projects in Chicago would wait in line for an hour to see this, I actually understood that my life's purpose was sort of set. I was a young revolutionary, became a revolutionary in college, and if you had asked me whether art could have changed the world, I would have said yes. But there would have been a caveat on it. I would have said, if your name is Steven Spielberg or Chuck D, those guys reach millions of people. I'm a visual artist. When's my work going to be seen and affecting things that much? And then the president is denouncing my work, the Congress is outlawing my work. And people are not only standing in line for an hour, but they're calling in talk radio stations, not only giving me political support from the housing projects, but also giving me art criticism. And so this was a sort of a watershed moment for me, but it also says a lot about what art can do. But there was a problem. There was this unjust law. So what does one do when one is confronted with an unjust law? Well, one defies that. This is me burning flags on the steps of the Capitol. There were 3 other people that did it, but this is the only photograph that I have to show you of it. Another person was a guy named Joey Johnson, who was a flag burner from a previous Supreme Court flag burning case that went to the Supreme Court. Pardon?
David Blaylock.
David Blaylock, who he's saying is David Blaylock's a Vietnam veteran. The Vietnam vets often were with me. They actually went to Vietnam and learned something about what America does in the world. And a revolutionary artist named Sean Eichmann. So this went straight to the Supreme Court, and you can see this is United States of America versus Sean Eichmann et al. I'm part of et al, very proudly so. And so you guys now can do whatever you want with the flag because of the decision that came down in this case. You can make art with it, you can wear it on a flag lapel pin, you could blow your nose in it, you could burn it on the steps of the Capitol, you could do whatever you want. So, But the thing is, this work, again, is old work. It's from it was 1988, 1987. But it did actually set the stage for a lot of my thinking and a lot of the art that I come to make. The world, as you've seen in some of that, shows, it's kind of intolerable. I think it's a real horror for the majority of people and the majority of humanity. I make art to help humanity get to a different era, without exploitation and without oppression. And I said, we need revolution. This whole system is worthless, and no basic change for the better can come until it's overthrown. This country was founded on slavery and genocide. It was based on exploitation and oppression today. And looking at criminal justice, we're going to be talking a lot in this conference about criminal justice, mass incarceration, prison industrial complex. Looking at criminal justice, you can just very simply and straight up say it enforces white supremacy. It's systemic, it's institutionalized racism. Now, Michelle Alexander, which I hope some of you guys have encountered, her book, The New Jim Crow, actually breaks a lot of new ground in thinking and systematizing and summarizing a lot of what's going on. And one of the things she showed in that book is that you don't need overtly racist judges, like you had during the 1950s, say, when Emmett Till murderers went to trial, to implement a criminal justice system where 1 in 3 young black men, where 1 in 3 black men will be incarcerated at some point during their life. 1 in 3 black men born today, black children born today will be incarcerated at some point in their lives if this current trends continue. And so Michelle Alexander breaks this down. And one of the things she said, and she sort of shows how it goes, she says, vast numbers are rounded up by cops in poor black and Latino communities, and the cops have backing from all levels of government to implement unconstitutionally racist policing of these communities, particularly based on drug war policies. Once arrested, people don't have access to quality lawyers, defendants get overcharged by prosecutors and are threatened with even more serious time for petty offenses. Juries are stacked against blacks and Latino. Black jurors dismissed, leaving juries disproportionately white. Once convicted, blacks and Latinos do longer, harder time because they are sentenced under harsh drug-related sentencing. If released after doing time, people face a lifetime of legalized discrimination. People are denied employment, housing, education, and public benefits, and this often leads back to prison. In some states, that's the end of the Alexander quote. In some states, blacks go to prison 20 to 57 times the rates of white men. And there's currently 2.3 million people in prison, about 1 million of whom are black. The statistics show the racist nature of the criminal justice system. My talk on racism isn't anything new, and you guys actually know a lot of this probably, at least anecdotally or experientially, but this is not anything particularly path-breaking. I'm an artist, I read other people, I do research. But the problem, everybody knows this, but the problem is, A, this system has no solution to this problem, and B, so many people are willing to accept a patently racist warehousing of black people as the price of having a society that they like. Many rationalize this. Many attempt to change the subject. Some people say, hey, black people have to take responsibility. This does tremendous harm and is morally bankrupt. As Ta-Nehisi Coates recently wrote, to tell a black man, to yell black on black crime is to shoot a man and then shame him for bleeding. Okay? Instead, what we need to really be discussing is how to get rid of this system. Looking at mass incarceration is one way to look at criminal justice. Murder by police is another. This year alone, there have been over 760 people killed by the police. Blacks are killed at a rate of 3 to 4 times the rate of white people. So this is an image of Eric Garner just before he's completely choked to death. This is Walter Scott as he's fleeing for his life, being shot. Instead of showing you a litany of horrors of black people being killed by the police, which I could do, I just want to show you the faces of some of the people. And part of why I'm doing this is that this is the background that gives context for the work that I make. This is Eric Garner, not being choked to death, but just enjoying a good night out. This is Walter Scott, who was shot in the back in South Carolina. This is Mike Brown. Tamir Rice, again, 12-year-old boy, killed in Cleveland, 2 seconds after the police show up on the city. Nicholas Hayward Jr., a name many of you guys might not be as familiar with, but I'm friends with his father, Nicholas Hayward Sr. He was killed in his housing project while playing with a bright yellow and green and orange squirt gun, and a housing cop shot him when he was 13 years old. This is Justice Howell. He was killed in Zion, Illinois, fleeing for his life. This is Freddie Gray. He was killed in Cleveland. in Baltimore, sorry. Ayanna Stanley Jones shot in her own house in Detroit, Michigan, while lying on a couch. Philando Castile, the name that we recently learned of, shot trying to hand a policeman a wallet which the policeman asked for in his own car and bled to death next to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend's child tried to comfort her mother, a 4-year-old child, as he bled to death next to her. And this is Alton Sterling. So the thing is, people are actually standing up and fighting back, and this is a very good thing. The real question is, what side are you on? Are you going to side with the people of Ferguson and the people of Baltimore? Or are you going to actually say, no, we have to find some other way to change this, not that? We need all sorts of people in the streets and beyond to stop this. Are you trying, so in thinking about which side are you on, are you for trying, convicting, and jailing killer cops, or are you for continuing to let them get away with murder? Thousands have been killed by these cops, and there's no statute of limitation on murder. Are you for dismantling the Jim Crow of mass incarceration that is systematically enforcing white supremacy and destroying lives? As part of that, are you for shutting down most of these prisons and giving those inside their lives back? Are you for stopping the police from killing people? And again, this is the context of my work. So, back to the art show. This is not my work. This is a flag that the NAACP used to hang outside of their national headquarters in New York from 1920 to 1938. And it said a man was lynched yesterday. Sadly, I feel that that needs to be updated, and so I made a man was lynched by police yesterday. And some people have said that's a bit extreme. Well, the police kill about 5 times as many people a year as black people were killed at the height of lynching. This piece became quite a sensation. This is the front page of the New York Times Online, and several places have requested to be shown. This is a mock-up of an artwork that doesn't yet exist. It's supposed to be shown in Kansas City right now, but the billboard company, Outfront Media, the 3rd largest billboard company, has said no, they won't print this, even though they have a contract with the art institution that wants to show it. So this is a project called Wanted, which you can see at the gallery. Wanted masquerades as wanted posters, and they're wanted posters for crimes. It's a project about the criminalization of youth that has many layers. It masquerades as wanted posters, but for crimes, things that are not illegal. But it was a community engaged project where I worked with a set of about 12 youth over the course of 8 weeks. So I was working with the youth. There were a community forum that had, and sometimes I was working with the Stop Mass Incarceration Network, which is an organization to stop mass incarceration. And so at these forums, the youth would sometimes tell their individual experience of being messed with by the police. The Stop Mass Incarceration, the social justice group would actually talk and put their individual stories in a broader historical and national context. And then there was a sketch session to make the sketches that you see that, which was done as a performance. So an adult sort of would see some of these youth, and the next day they would actually go meet with a police-trained forensic sketch artist, and they would do a sketch session. And this was done sort of as a performance, so people could actually see the process by which wanted posters are done. And I really encourage you to go to the gallery and see the video there, because you will start to actually understand that while these pictures are very specific, they're also extremely generic at the same time. And you will question the actual veracity of the images there. So these, wanted posters and wanted fits description. And about 11% of the people that were stopped by the New York Police Department from 2008 to 2012, 2004 to 2012, over 5 million people that were stopped, 11% supposedly fit the description of a known criminal in the eyes of the NYPD in the reports that they wrote. 43% were stopped for furtive movement. Oh, I think you move furtively, so that would be a reason to stop you. And for those who don't know much about stop and frisk, it's not, excuse me, sir, I'm a police officer, I'd like to have a conversation with you, I've stopped you. Can I please pat you down gently and politely? Stop and frisk is basically, at best, sexual molestation, where people are humiliated and degraded. And Eric Garner was basically killed in a stop and frisk. It can escalate to that. Wanted for looking out. And the text, I'll just read this one. It's very generic, it's very police speak. Wanted for looking out, perpetrator probable cause to stop and frisk. Unk, female, Hispanic, height 5'6", weight 130 pounds, hair black, eyes brown, last known address 000, unknown. It's not really going to help you identify anybody. On Monday, July 14th, 2014, at 2300 hours, female Hispanic, approximately 16 to 20 years of age, was observed standing in the intersection of 145th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, the female wearing a green t-shirt. Officers alleged that suspect appeared to be on the lookout. Suspect fled to parts unknown when approached. Suspect is believed to associate with other teenagers in the vicinity. Police believe that suspect may be in a gang database. The suspect is wanted by her family, friends, and neighbors. To download copies of this poster and display them, www.wantedproject.com. So this was trying to actually invert who wants these people and actually get the neighborhood to actually embrace them. And so I said there were these town hall meetings, these community fora, there was work with the youth. We also went throughout the neighborhood and went to barber shops, nail salons, bodegas, delis, and talked with people and said, can we put up wanted posters? And initially people would say, no, you can't put up a wanted poster. But then when we said, no, this is about how youth are criminalized, everybody had a story to tell, and most of these places wanted to put them up. We also fly pasted them on construction sites. We had larger versions. But this is, Chinese food shops. And they were, literally all over 125th Street in Harlem and all up and down Malcolm X from 125th to 145th Street. They were really unavoidable, and so people really had to confront what this was. And there was no sign on the project saying this isn't our project. We just wanted people to think, oh, I have to read this. And once they read it, they say, oh, I can participate in this. This is a project called Stop, which I'm not going to talk a lot about. I'm just going to say that it's a 2-channel projected video. And this is basically a channel. This is a channel. These are young men that I worked with for about a year. Actually, on both sides, these are young men from East New York and Brooklyn, and these are from Liverpool in England. And I'm going to show you how these videos work. And yeah.
I've been stopped 60 or more times. I've been stopped by the cops 150 times, probably a little bit more.
I've been stopped and searched more than 100 times.
I've been stopped 60 or more times.
So this video goes on
Stop by the police.
for about 7.5 minutes, and during the entire time, the people are just repeating walking this out by the police. Since the entire project is on view with the gallery, I'm not going to continue to show this, but you get the idea.
Does anybody have any money to burn? Money to burn. Do you have money to burn? Money to burn. 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 really went off. Money is fun. You have money to burn, sir? Money is fun. Money is fun. Money is fun. You have money to burn, sir? How about you? Do you have money to burn? Money is fun. Money is fun. Money is fun.
You're being swallowed right now. Yeah. Can you see your identification?
No, I'm just asking you. I'm asking you first. I'm not arresting you. I'm just asking. Well, not yet. We have any substances or anything like that?
Return date for August 19th, the report. It's on 346 Rowan. Go there, there will be a warrant for your arrest. You can find some better ways to get your own arrest.
Money is fun.
The Dred Scott decision. Opinion of Chief Justice Taney. Transcript of Dred Scott versus Sanford. 1857. December term. 1856. Dred Scott versus John F.A. Sanford. Dred Scott, plaintiff in error. The John F.A. Sanford. Chapter 1. 1. Upon a writ of error to a circuit court of the United States, the transcript of the record of all proceedings in the case is brought before this court and is open to inspection and revision. 4. A free Negro of the African race whose ancestors were brought to this country and sold as slaves is not a citizen within the meaning of the Constitution of the United States. 5. When the Constitution was adopted, they were not regarded in any of the states as members of the community which constituted the state, and were not numbered amongst its people or citizens. Consequently, the special rights and immunities guaranteed to citizens do not apply to them. And not being citizens within the meaning of the Constitution, they are not entitled to sue in that character in a court of the United States, where the circuit court has not jurisdiction in such a case. 6. The only 2 clauses in the Constitution which point to this race treat them as persons who it was morally lawful to deal in as articles of property and hold as slaves. 7. Since the adoption of the Constitution of the United States, no state can, by any subsequent law, make a foreigner or any other description of persons citizens of the United States, nor entitle them to the rights and privileges secured to that citizen by the instrument. 8. They had, for more than a century before, been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. He was bought and sold and treated as an ordinary article of merchandise, and trafficked wherever it was profit could be made, upon the same principles which prevailed at the time of the Declaration of Independence. As relates to these states, it is too plain for argument that they have never been regarded as part of the people, or the citizens of the state, nor supposed to possess any political rights which the dominant race might not withhold, or grant at their pleasure. America enslaved millions of Africans, continued to enslave millions of their descendants after the Civil War, and currently imprisons 12% of their male descendants aged 20 to 34. Furthermore, 33% of African American men will be imprisoned during their lifetime, and many will face legalized discrimination. Neither presidential candidate plans to eliminate this mass incarceration. A vote for either candidate implies acceptance of continuing this legacy. With knowledge and full understanding of this, I, state your name, will/will not vote in the 2012 presidential election. And in the voting booth, the instructions that told people what to do, they were preceded by 2 questions. The first is, would you have voted during slavery? And the second is, would you vote in a segregated election? The artwork that people were given basically reproduced the text from the questionnaire, but also with a drawing of the historic figure Dred Scott that was made during his lifetime. And since I'm basically at time, I'm going to skip over talking about this project, which is a future project that I'm doing called Slave Rebellion Reenactment. And I'm just going to show you pictures and let you know it is a Slave Rebellion reenactment. There's a book that discusses a bit that has just been published. I've got a couple copies of it if you want to get it afterwards. And these are some of the things that are in the book, but we don't have time to talk about it. I'm going to show one last work, which is a 1-minute video. I'm going to attempt to show one last work. I'm going to end the slideshow and then show you the video through another means. So hold on for a second. Today we face a choice about who we are. They want us to vote.
The choice is about our future, and we face serious problems.
Will we let them continue to poison us? Will we let them continue to murder us?
Will we allow them to continue to warehouse us in prison? Will men continue to be trained to dehumanize women?
This system puts our planet in peril. Will we let this system continue to wage endless war?
approve this message.
So the video is not actually yellow. I don't know why it was projecting that way, but as you can see, it's projecting the whole screen is yellow. So if you want to see it, go to YouTube or Vimeo, look it up. We have time for questions and answers right now, and we're going straight to panel.
So we can probably take 3 or 4 questions right now, and then we'll go right to the panel. No questions. Yes.
If you lived in a world without oppression and systematic racism and things of that nature, what would be your inspiration to create art?
Flowers. No. No. Look, I think that the oppression that exists today is man oppressing, humans oppressing other humans. It's unnecessary. It's outmoded, and that is what inspires me to make a lot of art. Is helping humanity get to a different era. In the future, there will still always be a myriad of things that need art made about. Sometimes it will be people trying to understand more about the world in a scientific way, including the struggle against nature. There will always be difficulties that humans will face and questions that will come up as the new arises. And so that would be something that would inspire me. But also just I am in constant awe and wonder of the world and universe I live in. And there's a lot. One thing, after I finish Slave Rebellion reenactment, my next big mission is to try and, there's an artist residency at CERN, where the Large Hadron Collider is. I want to get there. Those scientists are probing the very intricate essence of nature and what the universe is. And I want to connect with that and make work about things like that. And I think there's a range of things that people, including myself, can make art about, both now and in the future. Much of the work that I've shown you and that I make work about really is about the world and a lot of the oppression and exploitation that exists and people freeing themselves and emancipating themselves from that oppression and exploitation. But there's a whole lot of things in human thinking to make work about. And it is also an aesthetic game. And I was joking when I said flowers, but a tiny bit of my work is about just beautiful things. And there's an aesthetic edge to my work. So there's a lot to make work about, even if we get to a far better era.
Question here.
What happened after the money to burn situation? Did you go to court or what?
The main thing that happened is capitalism still kept on grinding people up and destroying people's lives and turning homes into commodities and food into commodities, and so that was unchanged. But in terms of me personally, I did have to go to court, and the court, the statute, it wasn't even a misdemeanor. It was a city code that I supposedly violated, so they gave me a disorderly conduct. I showed up to this court, which is used to handling things. The cases before mine were called open container, Heineken, open container, Budweiser, open container, Schlitz, or something like that. And so then I come with this case that's kind of a real case, and I have a lawyer, which is like completely unheard of. And basically, because the cops perjured themselves in the statute of disorderly conduct is very narrowly written, and they said that I was obstructing pedestrian traffic, and we had video from the time I arrived on the scene to the time I left, which showed that not only was I not doing that, but the cops were lying about that. They also lied about a couple of other things, and so it was effectively thrown out. There's more nuance to it, but I've had several encounters with police for my artwork, and I've never been convicted.
Do you think that there is a template for a revolution, or do you think that it can be found in little nuances throughout life?
I don't think there's a template in that you just like pick up a book from the past and suddenly you just apply it. I do think in short, Marx was right. I'm a communist. I think Marx's basic assessment of classes being historically conditioned was right, and they can be transcended. There have been developments of Marxism when the people had power in the Soviet Union and in China, from 1949 to 1976. But the point is not let's move back to the Soviet Union in 1930 or China in 1970. Bob Avakian, who's a leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, is somebody whose writings and speeches I've actually followed and been inspired by and looked at for about 25 years now. And he's really in fact, there's a new book that he's about to have come out called The New Communism. He's developed a new synthesis of communism, which is sort of standing on the shoulders of Marx and Lenin and Mao, but actually going beyond that and figuring out how to actually make revolution in a country like the United States. And as part of it, there's a manual called, or a book called the Constitution for a New Socialist Republic in North America draft proposal, which doesn't talk about how to make the revolution, but there are a lot of other Avakians read and talks about that. But that talks about what would the revolution day one be like after you had state power in a country like the US. And so if you want to know, well, what's the relation between the government and a party? What is the role of voting? How would you deal with constantly overcoming the birthmarks of a society like this one, which is riven with racism and sexism? And how do you actually make it so that, say, women aren't raped, and that horror that is very emblematic of this era, including on college campuses, is outlawed, and not only outlawed, but it doesn't happen anymore. How do men not get trained to treat women as objects? How do you actually deal with a situation where there are a lot of white folk, and we're seeing this now with Mr. Trump, are more than happy to say black people are not even as good as me, not human, white supremacy is openly spoken about. And so how do you, on the ashes of a society like this one, get to a point where you actually don't have racial oppression and class oppression? And so that book actually talks a lot about what this new society would be like, what the government would be like, and what would its aims, how would socialism be transitional to a world without classes?
Thank you for those questions. And to keep the time, and